Right, let's say
Okay.
good morning to Mr. Michael Annisette. Good morning, Mr. Annisette.
Pleasant morning to you and your listening public, Trinidad and Tobago. Blessings always.
Long
Blessings,
time
my
no see.
friend.
Happy post Labor Day. Is
He
he
You're
froze.
frozen?
frozen.
No,
Yeah.
no, hello.
You're right.
What you
We
say?
Oh,
thought you were frozen there for a
I
second.
said, I said
No,
happy
no, no.
post Labor Day.
What's that? I'm not hearing you
Happy
clear.
post Labor Day.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. I do appreciate it. I do appreciate it. On
How
behalf
were
of
the
all.
observance? How were the observances this year? Some are reporting smaller crowds than usual. What was it like for you?
No, well, I don't get tied up with numbers. Because numbers is not important to me. What is important to me is the message and the enthusiasm and the support of workers who were present there. That is what is
A
important.
union man saying he don't be impressed by numbers. That's a very strange saying.
No, well then, the world is a strange, strange thing. I can mention so many other strange things, but what I am saying, me, Michael Annisette, personally, because I know that a journey of 1,000 miles start with one step. I will say no more.
All right. All right. So what was the underlying message this time in our Labor Day? You know, there was always a message before in terms of what was happening in the country at that point in time. What was the underlying message this year in Labor Day?
The underlying message, obviously, was people's matter. People matter in Trinidad and Tobago. That's the underlying message.
Okay. And how was that message communicated to people?
How was that message communicated? Just like what we are doing now. We had a stage, we had trucks, we had representatives talking, and we had some addresses from myself, the president of JTAM and the president of PSA, who would have communicated our views to the large membership that was present.
People matter. There's been quite a bit of discussion about many unions that have accepted so far the 4% offer, and why that was accepted so widely, if I could use that term. Give us some your response to that, and why do you think that has been happening?
Okay, well, let me give you the National Trade Union, and I'm speaking generally for most workers in Trinidad and Tobago. And we empathize with the other unions who would have been um, subtly forced to accept the 4%. When you have an institution which is a special tribunal that is headed by someone who we all know, Larry Achong, and when you go to the special tribunal on the basis of the government through the CPO referring the matter to the special tribunal for the acceptance of a 4% over a 6-year period, which we disagree with economically, and we could demonstrate that, but I don't want to get into that now. And when you go to that special tribunal, and you would have seen in the newspaper where the PSA legal representative, senior counsel, Douglas Members, took the government witness apart in the context of why, on the basis and the rationale for 4%, why not 5, why not 6? And there was no answers forthcoming, or she could not have put on the table any logical explanation. But having said that, when you have a tribunal which has the power to extend your collective agreement to 5-year periods, and that is mentioned by the chairman of the special tribunal, I am concluding with the greatest respect to the chairman that that is not the way you negotiate. That is not the way that we call collective bargaining. That is not the independence of collective bargaining. It is not the independence of an institution. Collective bargaining is one of meeting and treating. And you have to allow the two parties to make their points, but not warn a union or mention that you have the authority to extend the collective agreement for a 5-year period. And there's nothing the union can do if I do that. And then what that means, that the collective agreement will have been for a 10-year period as opposed to a 6-year period. In those circumstances, one will understand why the unions said, okay, hold up on this special tribunal meeting, and we will go back to the CPO and sign off on the collective agreement, which is 4% over a 6-year period. And you could say anything, you could twist it any way you want. I want to make a fundamental point here, that the interministerial committee that is responsible for negotiations is not part of our collective bargaining process 1. It is not a legal instrument 2, and it's not a regulatory instrument 3. And therefore, the use of that instrument to force negotiations onto the public sector, we say it is a violation of the ILO Convention 98, which speaks of collective bargaining in a particular way. And I will want to make just one more point, if you allow me. One has to take into consideration, and I want the public to listen for this, that within the very said period, the public sector and private sector were negotiating. The private sector were able to negotiate all the 3 years agreement to the present point. And they were offering a minimum of 9% over a 3-year period. Stop there. But this government did not engage in negotiations over a period of almost 9 and in some instances 12 years. And therefore we are saying that is fundamentally flawed and is not in keeping with good industrial relation practices, and is a fundamental breach of the same Industrial Relations Act and the Special Tribunal Act that the government speaks of, because they, as a government, were in fundamental breach by not engaging the union in those discussions. And I have some documents here. All right, I have
this government. You mean the government?
Well, anyhow, you want to put it, D and this, in my humble opinion, mean the same thing, right?
Well, it can't, eh?
Yes,
because we had a change of government 8 years ago.
All right, the government and this government. What is the difference? The government is present, and this government means singular in English. But I don't want to be sidetracked with those kinds of conversation, because that will do nothing for Trinidad and Tobago. What we have to talk about is whether or not workers in Trinidad and Tobago, with a 4% over 6 years, given the exponential rise in cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago, given the fact that the private sector were able to settle their negotiation for the said period for a 3-year period, each for a minimum of 9 percentage points for those periods, and given the fact that the private sector operates within the same economic environment, how do you juxtapose that the government can now come and offer their employees, where they have a legal responsibility to treat and meet in good faith, 4% over a 6-year period, and that matter was referred to the court by the government after 2 meetings, and after a prime minister went on a political platform, and after he spoke to his constituent and said that we can't pay more than 4%, and all those who marching for the back pay, they may get their back pay, and they're going to lose their jobs, which is a fundamental breach of good industrial relation practices, and is fear-mongering, and is a misrepresentation of what a prime minister of a country ought to do when a negotiation between independent bodies are being negotiated.
So you're suggesting that it's because of a statement like that the unions were forced into taking the 4%?
Excuse me, sir. Let me make my point again.
It's a question.
No. You see, I am telling you, I understand Trinidad and Tobago, and I would not be distracted. Let me repeat what I said. If before negotiations, right, and during the negotiations, that the Prime Minister, who is the head of the government, can go on a political platform and can go in a party constituency meeting, all right, and make pronouncements on the negotiations and what he can only pay while the process of the negotiations is going on. Anybody who have common sense, anybody who is honest, anybody who is spiritual, anybody who understands the process of negotiation will know that that is an interference in the process of negotiations, because what you would have done as a prime minister is to politicize the question of collective bargaining, which is a fundamental breach of good industrial relation practices. That is what I am saying.
But if the unions were strong on 4% being inadequate, even in the circumstance of the prime minister saying, well, if you get more, some people are going to lose their jobs, which is, kind of, I don't want to say a threat, but it's basically laying the gauntlet down. Why didn't the unions stand their ground?
Excuse me. You have to understand, you see, who are the unions that would have accepted? It's the unions that was referred to the special tribunal by the CPO through instructions of this government. And when you went to the special tribunal, all the arguments that the union would have made and put before that tribunal would have been able to demonstrate that the 4% in the circumstances of the economic realities of Trinidad and Tobago and what workers have to face economically will be inadequate and in fact will be disenfranchising workers in Trinidad and Tobago. And if the chairman of that tribunal says, well, I could offer 5 years and I have that authority and all, you cannot change that, what will happen? But let us look. How many other unions have not accepted the 4%? How many other unions? There are other unions that haven't accepted the 4%. So don't let us trade.
What unions are those? What unions are those?
Well, I could call NUGFW have not accepted it. Siemens Union have not accepted it. PSA have not accepted it. And these are major unions that represent the vast majority of workers in Trinidad and Tobago.
There's a call coming out of the Labor Day observances for the minimum wage to be raised from $17.50 to $30. Since that call has been made, there have been several economists, financial experts who suggested, while everyone agrees because of the exorbitant rise in cost of living, people actually need more money in their hands, disposable income. However, if that happens, employers, particularly private sector, may choose the route of saying, well, you're adding to my overhead costs because that is not the minimum wage. I will either pass it on to the consumer in increased cost of goods and services and or reduce my workforce. How do you respond to that?
All right, I will respond to that in 2 ways. As I speak to you, the minimum wage of $17.50 have been in existence over a few years, okay? And that did not stop the same business people in passing on all the costs to we, the workers. It never stopped. And that has been a reality. Trinidad and Tobago is the only society that I know, given my analysis, that when a cost of a good goes up, it never comes back down. And I'm therefore, all that talk is just talk in our opinion. If you raise it or if you don't raise it, the business community modus of operandi is to always pass the cost on to the public and the public. Having
But
said that,
while I agree in some measure with that, Mr. Annisette,
okay,
you're talking about an almost doubling of the minimum wage. And is that I'm against? Let me finish. Let me finish, please. You're talking about an almost doubling of the minimum wage. And while you may be right in some regard regarding you're right. I see at one point shipping costs were high, prices went up. Shipping costs stabilized, prices did not come back down. Prices of goods overseas imported come back down, prices don't necessarily go down in a timely manner with the cycle with the price cycles around the world. But you cannot discount the fact that if minimum wage almost doubles, there is going to be a significant rise in the cost of goods and services. And that is not to say that costs aren't rising, but do you want that? Is that a practical approach? In addition to some employers may also choose to either reduce their workforce or reduce the number of hours their workforce is allowed to work.
Comrade, that is a standard practice. And you see, I don't want to get into the talk of whether the minimum wage is supposed to be $30, $20, or $25. I don't think that is the conversation that we in Trinidad and Tobago should have. The question to me has always been and will continue to be in the National Trade Union Center whether or not 1750 in this economic reality is an adequate amount of monies to be paid to workers. And then we could have the conversation whether it's 30, whether it's 25, whether it's 18.
Yeah, right. No one's arguing that. No one is arguing whether it's
Listen, if somebody has a view, like you have a view, I respect people's views, but at the ending of the day, we will look at the data, we will do the economic analysis, we will look at what is the purchasing power of our workers, what is the basket of goods, and how much money, right, that is required now to buy that basket of goods. Those are economic realities that I'm talking about, and then that will drive the question of the wage increase. It is not driven by what Michael and Annisette say, or what Comrade Roger say, or what Comrade Baptiste say, right? And then you see, we tend in Trinidad and Tobago to hold on to those issues rather than looking at the real issue to me, which is no one can deny it, that $17.50 an hour as a minimum wage is not adequate for Trinidad and Tobago, and it is disenfranchising those workers who are the majority of workers. Yeah. And let me make another point.
Let me interject. It was said on the platform of the unions at Labor Day, but nobody said what you're saying now, you know.
Hello, comrade. Why are you making that an issue? Let me make another point.
It was done on your platform.
Allow me to make another point, please. Let me give you Barbados, which I think is 166 square miles or so. When the Maya Motley government took over, they only had 4 weeks of foreign reserves. They had to go into the hands of the IMF to pull them out. And you know what that government did? Which Trinidad and Tobago must understand? They called together the private sector, the business community, labor, and the government. And they sat down and agreed with a tripartite approach. And I am happy to say that notwithstanding what the economists and those economists who live in glass ceilings, all right, would have been telling the government in Barbados, do not increase the minimum wage for the very same reason that you are articulating. All right? The government went on to increase the minimum wage, 1, and 2, the Barbados government regularized the employment of over 3,000 public servants who were working for years upon years without being regularized. And while they were advised that if you do that, it will interfere with the economy by the IMF, economic lords and them. You know what happened? Barbados is thriving much better because of what they did. And you know what is the story? In that, when workers have disposable income in their hands, when workers have regularized employment, it helps your economy to grow. Unlike Trinidad and Tobago, where 65% of the government employees are temporary employees. Let us have that kind of conversation if we are serious about enfranchising Trinidad and Tobago so we could have a better society for all and not for a few. Because the question of disposable income and the question of the gap between the rich and the poor is widening. I mean, very frightening in Trinidad and Tobago. And if we don't address that situation, the social fabric of our society is going to suffer. And that's a reality. And I will make a further point that America would have developed their economy because the America did not come a first world country and the leading country in GDP. What they did during the war, they employ people. They recognized that the employment of people was so critical and proper wages, and they were able to grow their economy.
Yeah. So Mr. Annisette, after all is said and done, what would you think is a fair minimum wage?
What I will think that 1750 clearly is not fair. 1750. Hold on, brother. Sip your coffee.
You're going to repeat all what you said before.
No, but hello. But if you want to tell me what to say, well, it's best we do have a conversation.
No, I'm just looking for an answer.
What if you ask the question when they let him answer?
Comrade, you can't ask me a question and then want to bully me. Comrade, I wouldn't want to make a statement. Listen, you are.
Mr. Annisette. I asked a question after all you said.
You are trying to force an issue. And I understand why, but I wouldn't be tied up in that kind of conversation with you this morning. I
have no agenda, Mr. Annisette. I have no agenda.
Did I say that? Did I say that?
Did I say that, sir? I have to interpret your words to mean.
All right. We are getting tied up in semantics. Mr. Annisette, answer the question, please.
All right. So then, what I am saying, right? Given what has happened in terms of the purchasing power of the dollars of Trinidad and Tobago, given the fact that your dollar would have devaluated in the sense then that what you could buy 5 years ago, 6 years ago, or 12 years ago, with that dollar you cannot buy again. Ideally and economically, in my humble view, that the minimum wage should start at a minimum of 10%, 10%, hear what I'm saying, annually. Because here what is our problem in Trinidad and Tobago. When we give up 10% of the minimum wage, 10% of the minimum wage annually that I'm talking about. Because what has happened in Trinidad and Tobago, when a minimum wage is given, it is stayed as a fixation for 5, 6, 7 years. So that what we need to look at is when was the last minimum wage given, and then work out the mechanisms in the context of how much percentage increase will be required to maintain decent wages and living wages. Because if wages are not decent, if wages are not living wages, you are interfering with household income, and the people who suffer inevitably is those workers who are at the minimum wage and who are the bulk of the purchasers in Trinidad and Tobago.
Right. So are you suggesting that you're adding 10% to what is the current minimum wage?
Yeah, what I said again. Apparently, I pride myself in articulating myself clearly, but maybe I'm not doing a good job with your ears. What I am saying, that we start up as a 10%. We look at when last the minimum wage was given, right? But we start as a 10% as a buffer. And then we do the economic analysis to determine what will be required over that period of time to maintain a decent living wages. I don't talk about minimum wage.
I'm following you now.
I am talking about decent
10% of
minimum
the 1750, 10% of 1750 is $1.75, right? So you're saying that for each year since we have had 1750, add $1.75 to it. Is that what you're saying?
Did I say that, sir?
No, I'm asking you if that's
I am saying, comrade, again, let me repeat it so that Trinidad will hear. And those who went on clothes, who went to the fridge, I will say it again for them to hear. Okay? I am saying that you start with a buffer of 10%. You look at when last there was a minimum wage given to those groups of workers who are the bulk of workers. And then you do the economic analysis to determine thereafter what are the percentage of wages that you're supposed to give. And I believe that the minimum wage must be tied into the question of cost of living rises in Trinidad and Tobago. It is unfair, patently unfair, to give me a minimum wage and keep the minimum wage there for 5 years, 6 years, knowing that there are increases and the government has no mechanism to control prices in Trinidad and Tobago. The ability to buy goods and services, the ability to pay my rent, to pay my light bill, for health, to carry my children to school, to pay transportation is a fundamental right, and is a right that is rooted in decent wages and living wages. Thank you.
Mr. Annisette, I want to change the conversation a bit. Recently at the Industrial Courts Meet the Court Symposium, Dr. Shelton Nichols, economist, presented some data, and I want to deal with two data points. One, the issue of the informal economy, and two, the disparity in wages generally between men and women, and the unemployment rate for younger people. Let's start with the informal economy and your thoughts on what should be done to protect workers in the informal economy, which Dr. Nichols indicated that cadre of workers is increasing significantly because of lack of jobs in the formal economy that they can access for many different reasons. And what you think the state should be doing with that cadre of workers in the informal economy, one, to protect them, but two, to benefit from their contribution to national development.
Okay, and I support the analysis that you give there. Having said that, what has happened in international countries and what the ILO, International Labour Organization, have demonstrated, and that is why they talk about the social contract and social justice and decent and living wages. The first thing that you have to do is to pass a law in Trinidad and Tobago, not a minimum law, a law like in South Africa and other countries where it is mandatory that any employer who employs anybody, whether it is informal or otherwise, these are the minimum standards that you must implement. That is the first thing that I believe that we could do. But more importantly, we must have a data mechanism set up whereby we can determine where the bulk of these people are, so that when we target a group, it will be well targeted. Because you see, a law means nothing on paper unless the law is implementable and you have people to manage it and police it. So then that is what I would want to suggest as a Trinidadian and as a trade union.
Don't you think it should be part of the remit of the unions to be doing that kind of research so that we kind of get data points from different independent bodies so we can get a sense of what we're dealing with particularly the informal economy that seems to be growing in Trinidad and Tobago?
All right, but to say we are not doing the research is not correct. We are into it, and because of the dire need to get what you call proper, authentic information from institutions, we have to go outside there and do our own research ourselves, which poses a problem, but we continue to do it. And that is why we could talk about the informal economy and what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago.
Isn't that part of what unions should be making decisions based on the data that they're gleaning themselves? Because if you are the one who spoke about data-driven decision making earlier on, and in the context of so saying that unions are not well poised to legitimately investigate phenomenon like this is strange to me.
No. Listen, hear what I'm saying. If you understand it to mean that, I do apologize, and I will repeat what I said. To get data in Trinidad and Tobago, because there are no institutions, all right, that you could go to, CSO or whatever, and say, listen, I want to get A, B, and C, like in other industries or other countries, I should say. What is required? We are required as a trade union, which we are doing, National Trade Union Center, NATUC, to go outside there and hit the ground walking to get information. You get information, some people are unwilling. And sometimes you have to come back now and test that information, because if you're talking about data-driven, the data must be correct for you to be able to be data-driven. But having said that, we will use our data, yes, on the basis of what we would have experienced, the kinds of reports that have been made to us. All right, and I will give you an example. I could talk about COVID-19. The amount of workers who were affected that came to NATUC for assistance and help is amazing. So those are the kinds of information that
stopping the unions from co-opting the services of the academic institutions and working with them to
all right. If you are not aware, and I will let Trinidad be aware, the Caribbean Congress of Labor, for which I am General Secretary, which represents the whole CARICOM region in terms of labor, we have engaged the Cipriani Labor College, all right, to be part of our secretariat. And the whole reason for doing that is to be able to do the kind of empirical and academic and professional research that you are talking about. And as I speak to you, the Cipriani Labor College of Labor, who haven't gotten a wage increase since 2007. That's an academic institution. And the last wage increase that they got was in 2007. That's a reality in my country, which was under the government of Trinidad and Tobago. They are working assiduously.
You're making a point about the academic institution and the research that you plan to do with them and going on a different route. Let's stay on course here, please.
No. I will finish. I'm not going. I'm just making a parallel point there. So that at the National Trade Union Center, we too are using the expertise in that institution to help drive our preparations for negotiations, to understand the economic issues, to understand how COVID would have affected the working class in Trinidad and Tobago and throughout the Caribbean region, so that when we papers and data that is well informed, that is well researched, and we hope that those kinds of information will drive the CARICOM heads to meet and treat with us in a particular way, so that we could enfranchise our working class.
Let's talk about employment rates, and Dr. Nichols also presented data that suggested that the demographics hardest hit by unemployment are younger people, young adults, and women, and what the union's stance is on that in the context of an egalitarian society, particularly those groups that are vulnerable where employment is concerned, and unemployment.
Okay, well, we have been articulating the whole question of equal pay for equal work, which is a ILO convention, and where there are collective agreements involving unions, recognized majority unions, and employers, the question of equal pay is always embedded in those collective agreements. All right, so I want the population to understand where you have a recognized majority union, which under the law gives the union negotiation and collective bargaining status. The question of equality, equity is always part of our collective agreement, so that the question of what the ILO say, that collective bargaining is part of a social construct that will bring about the kind of equity and equality that is required. We are not seeing that in the Caribbean region. Okay, so that is one of the recommendations that we would like to make, that we make collective bargaining and the right to represent workers much more accessible, rather than the cumbersome mechanisms that we have to go through in order to get recognition. I will tell the general public that there are companies who have challenged recognition, and it is ongoing for the last 9 years. And we have.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes, you can.
I heard you say something very interesting just now, and I'm in full support of it. And let me ask you, is that something that's resonating with the other unions? That issue of equal pay for equal work, is that something that the unions are spreading towards their people under their charge?
Yes, that is why. And then that is why every collective agreement that is registered in the industrial court, or we have oversight over the question of equal pay, right? It is part the terms and conditions. If you go on the port right now, whether it's Point Lisas or the port of Port of Spain, if I'm a junior clerk, whether I'm male or whether I am female, I get the same salary. All right, if you're going to Angostura, where our union recognizes, whether you are male or a female, you get the same benefits and the same salary. If you go at Whitco, where we represent workers. So that the point that I'm making is that the collective bargaining process makes provision, and that is the watch. I don't want to say dog, but that is the watch over that exploitation that we have, where you have industries that is not regulated, and therefore they can afford to exploit female workers, which is rather unfortunate. And another issue that we are putting into our collective agreements now is the question of gender-based violence, be it in the workplace or outside of the workplace.
Yeah. All right.
How do you think the IRA should be amended, given the challenges you're seeing in the work environment in Trinidad and Tobago? The main points of amendment that you suggest.
All right, okay. Are you aware that there was a committee that was set up? All right, and we call it an IRAC committee. At that time, Jennifer Battis was the Minister of Labor, and work would have been done. And propositions and amendments were submitted to the cabinet since 2017 in order to bring the IRA into reality and to reflect what is happening in the digital world, one, what is happening in the real world of work, two, and what will be required to make workers' rights and to join a union not cumbersome. And to date, the government or this government have not brought those amendments to Parliament, and that says something to us within the labor movement and the working class, people of Trinidad and Tobago. And then we believe, because that was
what are the main amendments you'd like to see, and why?
All right, one. All right, one. The issue, as I speak to you, you must have 51% of the workers in order to get recognition to negotiate for on behalf of the labor force or the staff whatever you want to call it. And the question that we ask, what happens to the 49 people, or 49% of the workers, I should say, who joins the union? And because there's a law which says you must have 51%, that is only when a union can negotiate for on behalf of the labor force. We want that amended because we must recognize, all right, that 49% of the workers are being disenfranchised by you not allowing them the access to collective bargaining. But more importantly, when we negotiate and we have 51%, you are allowed not to join the union and still get the benefits of what the union negotiated for its paying members. And we are saying, like in Grenada and other countries, the law must change where the workers who benefits from the union negotiations must be allowed to pay in law some kind of administrative fee, because what you are doing is allowing and pushing people not to join the union, but still getting the benefits of the union, which I think is unfair. And let me make a point. In general elections, I remember it's first past the post. And if 27% of the labor force, not the labor force, the population votes for a government, and that is the highest amount within the election dynamic, you know that government is put in place. There isn't anything that says that to run the government, you must get 51% of the votes of the population in order for you to qualify. That is not our system. And the question is, why do you do that to the working class? Why do you do that to workers? That we must get 51%, where in terms of our constitution, that doesn't apply when it's general election. The other issue that we would have asked for an amendment is the security of tenure for the industrial court judges. Okay, because what we recognize is that the judges in the industrial court has no security of tenure. Their contracts is renewable every 3 years, and the government, or this government who is in power, right, have the oversight. They have the oversight over the renewal of the contracts of those judges, and then therefore the question of bias and the independence of those judges comes into the focus in the context of the trade union movement, and therefore we are saying that judges from for the industrial court.
Are you questioning the integrity of the judges' decisions based on this 3-year term and the ability of the government to determine you or not? Is that what you're doing?
No. What I am saying is that when there isn't any security of tenure, when your employment relationship or continuance of that employment relationship is dependent on the government, right? It appears to us in NATUC that could be interpreted to be not fair. It could be interpreted to be biased, because we know the quality of Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, because the industrial court is a pillar of one of our institutions in Trinidad and Tobago, that industrial court, just like the judiciary, must have an independent body selecting the judges.
Okay. Mr. Annisette, thanks for being with us this morning. Always a pleasure.
The pleasure is always mine. Wendell, pleasant morning. And as I always end by saying, blessings to everybody. And may we continue to rely on our divine master and go back to our ancestor, mothers and fathers for guidance and protection, as we in the labor movement try to build a better Trinidad and Tobago for all and not a few people. thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to engaging with you all again. It was a pleasure.